behavioral health or a child welfare case management system.
So can I jump?
Those were the things that we addressed quite a while back when we identified things like the need for a mandated report, and the need for being able to exchange SDOH information from a healthcare system to human services. And we haven't touched on that in quite a while, you're right. And we probably should go back and for every single one of the user stories we have, refill out these tables that we started to create, saying what are the data elements, where do they come from, who do they go to.
So I think that would be very useful in our current sessions where probably many people were missing from those earlier discussions.
So let me jump in because I think we separate from this group but related, we're doing an exercise and will be in the weeks to come that might be quite helpful, I think. We have, for new people, the National Action Agenda, the way we're playing it out, the process is we have 6 work groups looking at different social determinants. And we're relating everything to the scenario, to the use case. The next set of exercises that we're going to do with the work groups, it includes the following questions for each work group.
Actually, Adam, I can
yeah.
show. I was thinking that
show it.
I can show it
because this will feed into your question, Susan, and into help you, Brian, and the group find some of the and identify some of the areas where you're looking for answers.
Okay, good.
Actually, that's a really, really important point because the challenge of this, which Alan alluded to and others, it's the intersectionality. It's how the pieces go together that's so hard to deal with because it's a systems level issue. It's a system of systems engineering kind of problem. You got, I don't have to tell you, you got it all which way. So what we've tried to do is, and it's really important if everybody can articulate this in your own words, which we're helping by developing the tools and stuff like that. So let me just show you the graphic because you remember the Thompson family graphic. So now we've automated it. I'm going to show you just a part of it because that might actually help as we go into the intersession meetings the next week or two to help the group think about what goes in, because it's almost a piece between what you're talking about, Susan, and what the use case is about and what pieces we want to actually specifically focus on. So hang on one second. Let me just take you through this. I've got it teed up here. I just got to share my screen. And so do you see my Thompson family screen, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. So this, for those of you new, there's a whole case, there's a 1-page, pretty detailed case study. This is the Thompson family. That's the core of the Integrated Care for Kids site with additions and other things on here that each of the 6 work groups can see themselves in. It's almost like an escape room, right? There's clues all over this in a way. And it's a very difficult situation where things have come apart in this family. Everybody's got a problem, multiple problems. So it's the end state, I guess you would say. So what we've done is now we've written sort of the Back to the Future case that says what would have happened if we hadn't, if actually some interventions happened. All the stuff that people know on this call needs to happen. We all know what needs to happen. But if some of those things actually happen, what would the world look like? And it's a lot better situation. It's not beautiful, but it's a lot better. And so we're actually asking people to look at that gap, that delta between, and we've sort of asked people to sort of wallow in this a little bit much, and it's uncomfortable because the situation is so uncomfortable and it's complicated. And I'm not sure everyone sees where we're going. So what we've done now is we've animated this so that the case study, as I said, there's a written case study that goes into the details. This is just the summary points of it. And so what happens is in the exercise, each of the intersection work groups are going to be, each of them are going to have a copy of this PowerPoint. And we're going to walk through it so that right now, if we're in the group, I'd say, okay, let's talk about Ruth. What do we know about Ruth? And let's go back to the use case. And let's look at the as is and the to be, if you want to call it that, I guess. And let's look at that. And then let's ask these questions here, right? We know that she's involved with TANF, SNAP, Medicaid. This is the downstream part. Work is cut. She's a grandmother. There's custody issues. Dad's approved. Dad's complicated. A lot of data points here. So the question up here is, what more information do you need to know from or about Ruth to assess and enable upstream intervention? And so I need to know. And so the group exercise will be to talk about this. We're in the process as we speak on populating this from the last 2 sessions. So a lot of groups took that matrix we created on the last work group and actually populated it. And we'll be doing more of this work over the next couple of days, so that each one will have some data points in there. And then what more information do you need to know from other work groups to assess which upstream interventions might be the most helpful? I hope this language is clear. It's an adaptation from what we did before. It's not a simple thought, but we're asking what do you need to know and what do you need to know from others? And so we capture that. Those become, in response to this use case, we'll sort through those, prioritize those, and figure out which pieces are actionable and that can be responsive, and the POC can be responsive to. So each group will, as I said, have their own slide deck, and they'll go through this, and then we'll summarize it. And so it goes through Madison, it goes through Jameson, it goes through John. The new case study has a lot more information about Dad, a lot more information, and it can be built out that way. And then Sarah, from the healthcare perspective, and Alan, we need a little help in the healthcare section on the interoperability piece, just as a note. And so then the last exercise, you do that through Sarah. This could be, this is a complex exercise. And then the last exercise is, we're going to review the Back to the Future scenario and the current scenario, and begin to describe some of the changes that need to happen, and some of the action items, so that we actually begin that process of winnowing down from the group of 100 what matters, what can we focus on, how does it relate to the actual use case in a narrower, slimmer way that we can then start to build up against. And so that's the message we're right in the middle of meeting with all of the leaders from the NAA groups tomorrow, and some of the tech folks have been, or some of the POC folks have been participating. Friday we meet with our synthesizer group, which is all of the bigwigs who can't join work groups, but pretty significant people who have a lot of experience with this, and we want to have involved to start to think about synthesizing. What's the process for synthesizing this stuff? And then on the 6th, we have this presentation on the POC. And then on the 13th, we bring everybody together, and we'll probably mix everybody up to start to talk about what we found or the results from this. We're still designing that meeting. So let me open the floor before, I'm sure there's a few questions there, but I'm very interested if that makes sense to everybody. Is it exciting? Is it overwhelming? I'm really looking for your feedback on this. I think we're all looking for your feedback. We're working diligently to take a really complex thing and actually make it happen. So floor is open. First of all, Susan, let me just ask you, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, heading there.
Getting there, okay. Getting there, that's good. We're heading in the right direction. Who else?
So this Ken, and you'll probably know what I'm going to say, but I'll say it anyway. Defining this stuff is really, it really should be done under the auspices of HL7. That's what they're there for. They're an SDO. The fact is that you can create data, content, and then implementation guides on how to use that data content, which can be more easily shared than a bunch of work groups sitting in meetings coming up with stuff that really doesn't have a great opportunity for distribution and made aware, of the community at large and so on. So I think that doing these things in that kind of an environment, really takes away from the importance of the content that you're trying to create and work with. But that's
And
my opinion. And so,
this is Brian Hanspicker. I, if you know anything about my background, I love standards bodies. I love SDOs. I've been chair and co-chair of lots of different standards working groups. The challenge, and by the way, I've also been a member of multiple different HL7 and fire working groups,
including gravity.
including, yes, gravity. And the challenge that we're trying to deal with here is, how do we turn around and do interoperability between the healthcare domain, which is rightly the responsibility of HL7, amongst a few other smaller standards bodies, and human services, which at the moment don't really have a standards body supporting them.
well, I think the Gravity Project is a perfect example of starting to, graft human services into the health domain.
Right.
My perspective is that HL7 needs to create a human services domain. And then, because, let's face it, if you have a case management system for child welfare, for example, and a child in the child welfare system goes to a doctor or hospital or whatever, and the case manager needs to be made aware of that. How is that data going to flow? It flows through an HL7 transaction of some sort or another, if it flows at all. So
And by the way, Ken, I agree with you 100% with the idea of having HL7 adopt human services. But what about the courts? What about homeless management information systems, which are defined by HUD? What about education, which are defined by EdFi, PESC, SEDS?
Yep.
Is HL7 going to adopt every other information domain?
Well, I think that, there's going to be things done over time. I mean, for example, HL7 today, represents patient as the central, figure, if you will, in the process, right? Whereas in human services, it's really about person, right? So, what's different between a patient and a person, for example? Those things have to be, fleshed out. We probably have a pretty good idea of what person is from the NEAM work and things of that nature. If
I really agree with Ken in many aspects of things, and particularly, having watched mostly in the healthcare space, standards evolve over the past 20 years. And particularly when we started with Hopkins, with this system that they use that we created for clinical research, and this is 2005. And we're saying to them, look, you should use some of these vocabularies that have been established and CDISC, and back then it was HL7 version 2 or whatever it was. And they said, what's that, right? They had no idea. No, we don't need that. But also in looking around, there were at that point something like 300 different standards committees for healthcare. You're probably aware of some of them, right? So it's actually, I'm not sure how many there are now. I do really feel strongly that HL7 has done a really great job to kind of pull things together with the fire concept. And then, it's still evolving. There's many, many details of what fire resources need to tackle, and it's being done. And I believe that is a great kind of human, organizational, how do we work together to do this? That's going to cover all the needs in these other domains, justice, services. Well, this is my belief. And it doesn't mean it's not there today. And there's different concepts, I think, which maybe that's your point, Dan, is other concepts that we don't have to deal with in healthcare, like someone's a prisoner, right? But other than that, a lot of it is like, how do you organize data points and the concepts around them to exchange them? So I think Fire has a lot to offer.
This is really great. I'm going to kick it back to Brian. There's two things. One is theoretically, yeah, over time, pragmatically, Insight's got the clock is ticking. They got to build an infrastructure starting January. So we need to help them do part of this case study. That's our value proposition is we start in 2021. We're not studying, we're not admiring, we're doing that as well. We're actually doing stuff that can be utilized by organizations that actually have to do it now. And education is a huge part of that. Housing is a giant part of that. The courts are a huge part of that. We're doing stuff with Pew right now to figure out how to deal with civil legal and talk about a social determinant. You know, we have to be able to deal with all of those things and now, which is a different conversation than one giant standards body, or, you know, HL7 would be great. And I love the idea you talked about. Human services is a you know, it's tribal. It's tribal. They're not going to roll over, especially if they, you know, if they got to update their access databases, forget about it. We're talking about
We need a concept called tribes. I mean, it is really huge in human behavior. So we do have to explicitly, I think, and you can't do, it's not there today maybe, but I'm just saying what's done with actual working groups to deliver interoperability tools, you know, actually resources as fire specifications, that is a really good thing that's emerged that we should adopt and apply it to these other domains. And what we have today or next month, I agree, it's a lot more to do.
So I want to add one additional thing, Ken, because as part of the demonstration projects, the use case, we are leveraging data elements from the Gravity project around food insecurity and housing and homelessness that are being adopted, and we are very intentional about that. There is also, and this is probably out of scope for the existing integrated for care for kids timeline, but Daniel, just mentioning, I mentioned this in a previous email, 360X, which is a protocol to essentially have electronic medical record to electronic medical record, closed loop referrals. We are moving forward with developing an implementation guide for doing referrals to extra clinical organizations or food pantries. So this is again a protocol that is going through all the HL7 committees for approval. It's I think just about approved, and I am like one of the leads on developing the implementation guide for the social determinants of health referral. So that is and we're coordinating actually with the Gravity project to identify essentially demos at MyHIN in May. So the two committees got together to make sure with the ONC to make sure that we weren't stepping on the Gravity project's toes, that we had their full endorsement to do this. And so I just wanted to provide the update that NetSmart is agreed to participate in this MyHIN May Connect-a-thon, demonstrating 360X social determinants of health referrals. But that's now what relationship that has to Project Unify. That's not been determined. I'm just bringing this news to you guys for the first time today. So,
Okay.
but I just want to provide that context though.
Good, fantastic.
I'd like to throw in one more thing for Ken, that just as some reassurance that we are supportive, a number of us, I should say, are supportive. I shouldn't speak for everyone, but of your general proposal. We actually, Eric and I, with Daniel, had made a pitch to HHS. What was it, about 6 months ago, I think, to map NEEM core to FHIR, the reference implementation model ontology, to create an aligned ontology for NEEM. that would be aligned with fire so that we could define things that were conformant with NEAM for instance, for the courts, which are heavily invested in NEAM, or maybe some new definitions that were for human services that were NEAM compliant, like a mandated report, but that were native fire resources. And our pitch went nowhere. There just wasn't an interest.
Well,
Could I say one more thing, Dan, just for a minute? Just everyone has heard of it. And it was, there's the work. Okay.
I was
Yes
just
or no?
going to say that it kind of got caught up when Jose Arrieta left. It was right at the level of CDO or CTO. What was he? Was he Chief Data Officer or CTO?
Chief Information Officer.
Okay, so they were, what's his name? And they were able to get to that conversation, but it never got had. So it was, I don't know if it was dropped. It was, there's a million things going on, right? So, I just wanted to put that qualifier out that it was banging around out there, and people were aware of it in ONC and HHS and ACF and other places, and we were trying to, sort of see if we could move that forward because of what Brian said. So
one of the tactics we have as part of Project Unify is to find ways where we can make use of existing technologies such as fire or direct to that happen to currently be healthcare specific, but use those for exchanging information with other domains.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
I think I was trying to make the point that it's not just existing fire standards or resources, it's the process by which they operate.
Sure.
And then as we think about processes and making things more dynamic, which I think is really needed, just to make sure everyone knows, the object management group, and their business process modeling notation has been around for a long time. Now it's BPMN version 2 or whatever, 2 point something, but they are, as some of you know, I'm sure, but, working with HL7 to kind of bring together and come up with, more complete models for business processes in healthcare, which include the data interoperability.
Yeah, so I'll follow on that theme for a moment, and that is, OMG also has an MDMI 2.0 spec for actually doing semantic formats for V2 ATM ATD ADT, sorry, V2 ADT transactions going from CDA to fire bundles and fire bundle to CDA and so on and so forth. So, there's a lot of potential opportunity there to add the semantic capabilities to do NEAM to fire and fire to NEAM, for example. But, so let me just give you my perspective. I'm with ACF and I'm the lead for ACF's interoperability program, process, whatever you want to call it. So, there will be funding available to think and do things around, NEAM to fire and fire to NEAM and so on. So, HHS may not have interest, and I'm not sure who you talk to at HHS, but if you had a pitch or whatever that you created for them, if you send it to me, then, we can look to see how we can support things like that. So, we have to, write a reg around interoperability, for example. So, so there's lots of opportunities to try to get us all on the same page and, using the SDOs as we can to help facilitate some of this process.
He can.
That's my pitch,
Why isn't there more regulations around, like, just from a procurement perspective, that would, like, just foster interoperability as a matter of policy of saying, hey, you must propose something that meets XYZ standards.
Right. Well, in some regards, that's what ONC does, right? They specify general interoperability sort of, things they're trying to achieve and so on from an interoperability perspective, but they live mostly in the healthcare space. So, ACF lives in the human services space. So human services deals with things like education, things like child welfare, things like case management, things like the legal system and so on and so forth. So, I think regulations are made around uniqueness of the agency and what they're trying to achieve versus, just a general thing that says, we all should do, interoperability, period. It's a little tougher to figure out how to manage that from a federal level, right? So
Well,
I hope.
there are so many connecting points here, Ken. What's so amazing is, having you sit in that chair, knowing all of what you know, and some of the people on this call, the nesting Petrushka dolls, so to speak, are really coming together in a way that are really substantial. It's really quite. That's what keeps me going, really, because it's like, yeah, there's a lot of resistance and a lot of challenges, but there's a momentum, there's a forward momentum, I think, that is unprecedented in the last 10 years I've been doing this stuff. So it's cool if we can sort of guide a little bit the direction of stuff sort of crashing together in a positive way. There's stuff there that I don't. Anyways, there's a lot of good stuff moving in that direction that I think can like drive that.
So Daniel, this is Dave. Quick question for you. Have we yet gone out to the different domains and figured out who is committed to what set of standards? In other words, if NEAM is a committed standard that a number of the domains are going to go forward with, that weighs heavily on, we've got to figure out how to do that. Have we given much thought to polling the different domains to see what their current commitments are?
No, I don't. I think it's anecdotal. There's a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom about who's locked in. Justice is locked into NEAM. Education is locked into 3 different kinds of standards. Health is fire. Human services is kind of up for grabs, really, in many ways. Homeless is its own. The universe is fairly contained. That's what's great about what Ken is saying. If we can bring, and I love the idea of the process. I love having a process. I don't want us to have to create a process for an for a standards organization. That seems to be working pretty well. So, let's just bring that in, because human services has a lot of unstructured data as well. That's really valuable. Child welfare is all about, behavioral health is all about unstructured data. That's where the real useful stuff is, and we don't have a lot of good NLP or AI tools yet to really structure that stuff and make sense out of it. So I don't think there's.
Daniel, we can turn around and do things like make use of consent to share for helping with the confidentiality privacy problem associated with exchanging human services information. And for that matter, even educational information, since they don't, as far as I know, yet have these kinds of mechanisms built in for information exchange, though they are required to protect the confidentiality by FERPA. And the same may be true with criminal information and courts information, where we could apply consent to share in order to provide individuals and families with that semblance of confidentiality or control over their information and how and where it goes. And
Sure.
We've also been looking at, and I'm saying this mostly for your benefit, Ken, as I look at your little screen there, that we're also looking at, can we turn around and use ELTSS? Can we use fire referrals, 360X, for being able to make referrals to not just to various human services, benefits, services, programs, but also can we use those same tools from the school systems to behavioral health? Can we use those same tools from child welfare to a school system saying, hey, we need to get this kid into a special education program? So there's a lot of opportunity for us to make use of some of these healthcare standards, even long before we end up with HL7 starting to find formal standards for human services resources.
I agree wholeheartedly. And, consent to share really was driven by an HL7 work group, right, to define what a consent looks like. We did one in CDA and then we did one in fire, right? And so, there's a smart on fire consent to share capability that's already built that, can be launched from any fire-based infrastructure that supports smart on fire. So, and those exist as well. So, that there's great opportunity here to begin to converge, information in a standard manner. So, we don't always have to go to 3 or 4 or 10 different sources to figure out, what is this data, what is that data, and so on and so forth. And ACF intersects with all those, human services that you talked about. And my other point here is that, there's currently, as I understand it, no funding for NEEM anymore. And so, that makes it even more difficult because, the money I have available is a mere drop in the bucket, probably to what you need to continue to support and maintain and expand NEEM. So
Why couldn't we do something like what IGES has done to get corporate support for it in the membership, the same way they did for criminal justice? They have 150 or 200 different corporate members who actually support the governance body that government participates in and industry participates in a very functional way, as far as I can tell. So, the industry won't come to support it. I mean, they won't sponsor it unless there's an opportunity for it to be, or a threat of it becoming actually something they have to use. So they want to be part of it. That was the brilliance of what Paul and Shmendra talk about, which is, create the need for them to want to participate. And, that may be a way to go. We had to try to stand up. Part of the work we did in 2011-12 was to stand up the human services NEEM domain. We had actually industry at the table. We had IGES at the table. We were going to replicate that same model, and then stuff, proverbial quote unquote shit happened and got derailed. So
this entire topic is one that's incredibly important. It's one that's important enough, I think, for us to have a separate meeting specifically about it. And I say that partially to try to get control over my meeting.
Yep. I agree.
Because this was supposed to be how is our demonstration, what's the status of our demonstration, and get some review on a presentation that we're planning on doing as part of the demo next Friday.
So go for it, Brian.
Oh, okay.
No more questions.
So Brian, I'm sorry. I guess I started the derailment.
You derailer, you.
As you would want to do, Miss Fox.
It's really the subject that keeps me going.
Go ahead, Brian.
I don't want my tombstone to read that I never lived to see interoperability.
Well, first I should, I'm looking at the time here. First, I should provide some basic status, some basic context. here. Not too much because we're about to hopefully do a quick walkthrough of a presentation we're doing next week that'll provide even more information. But we have been working together for the last year and a half, 2 years, on trying to identify what the challenges are going to be, what the issues are going to be with interoperability between multiple different information domains. And we have a bunch of different working groups that you'll see here that have been working on some critical aspects. We also have some work moving forward to try to demonstrate what we have learned in the last year and a half. And that's what we're about to launch into. As part of that, we have different vendors who are working together to try to demonstrate point by point interoperability and identify what those pitfalls or challenges are in the process of doing that. And the very first demo that we have coming up is going to be next Friday, November 6th. And it is specifically between a homeless management information system represented by HS Link and a human services information system represented by Open City Labs Navigator product. And I provide all of that as context so that I can let folks know the status of the engineering work before we get into the demo review. And that is that as of this morning, we actually have limited interoperability happening between HS Link and OCL's Navigator. And we are now rebuilding a staging server so that we can finish testing that interoperability with the intention next Wednesday of being able to rehearse both this dress rehearsal for this presentation I'm about to put up on the screen, as well as go through the actual dress rehearsal of the demonstration. So that's the engineering status. Oh, and I need to forgive me here for a moment. I need to get my partner in crime back on the call.
And Eric,
Yeah.
why don't I email Eric? I noticed he was gone. Do you know if he had something else or?
He had another distraction he had to take care of.
Okay, I'll invite him.
And I just texted him saying that it was that we needed him back again.
Okay, great.
So with the status done, let me share my screen, and specifically Project Unify. And I'm gonna keep the slide sorter on the left up. If you guys can see the slides clearly enough.
Yep.
Okay, great. So, and I'm not going to try to talk to these slides. I'm just going to say what the messages are. But the one, and also anything that may be questionable so that I can get review feedback. Eric had suggested that I change the subtitle here from homeless management HMIS interoperability with human services to human services eligibility from homeless management social determinants, which is fully accurate and also I think gets to the point, brings up the fact that we're talking about social determinants of health, and we're also talking about human services eligibility in the process. And Daniel, I think these early slides you're going to be going through. So here's our standard housekeeping slide. Here's our standard, here's an agenda slide. Daniel, I've put things in what I thought was logical order, introducing the National Action Agenda, which then references the National Interoperability Collaborative, which then talks about Project Unify.
Great.
I made a small change to this slide up in the corner here to get the full name of the National Action Agenda.
Great.
We all love the Wayne Gretzky slide. I thought this would be a worthy slide to introduce the NAA. And this slide is unchanged.
Okay.
And but at the bottom here, it says leveraging 15 years of experience in the National Interoperability Collaborative Network to operationalize programs. So now we get to talk about, or you get to talk about the NIC. And from there, you can mention that one of the programs within the NIC is Project Unify, and kick it over to me where I'll talk about the general vision. And the important buzz phrases in here are proof of concept. We're not building a complete, fully interoperable system that knows how to exchange every piece of information between every single domain. But we are demonstrating that it is possible using standards-based information sharing to have replicable interoperability across health, education, human services, and the courts. Doesn't mean that we're using all the same protocols. It doesn't mean that we're all using all the same ontologies across each of these domains, but it is possible to identify sufficient mapping and alignment and exploitation of various standard services that are available, such as consent to share or ELTSSs, that would enable interoperability between domains that otherwise are in completely separate worlds. And that it's important that this is being pursued by an experienced, diverse, very knowledgeable group of subject matter experts, both from government and from industry, working together to try to figure out how we solve this problem for communities across the nation. And that, and somewhere in here, I thought maybe from the Inc. slide set that I've missed out on, somewhere we talk about this being largely driven by the requirements from integrated care for kids.
Right.
And that may be something that we want to rework back into the slides here. We get into the goals and objectives for Project Unify, that in particular to solve this, the goals and objectives highlight some very core challenges having to do with person matching across information domains. It's already a well-known hard problem within just the healthcare world. But when we add in human services and the courts, criminal justice, education, etc., it becomes an even more intractable problem, and one that we need to solve by coming up with some common agreements on how we handle person matching in a way that satisfies both the needs of healthcare and patient matching and human services for client matching, etc. As well as the challenges of security, privacy, and confidentiality. And I've already mentioned consent to share, but also the need for being able to exploit things like data segmentation for privacy, so that we know when was the last time a consent to share request was sent to this particular patient. So we're not constantly bombarding them with, hey, is it okay if we share this information? Hey, is it okay if we share this information? So we're trying to approach this with a good deal of deep thought for how to exploit consent to share, while at the same time recognizing that we're building systems that need to have some persistence on each end for the information that's being exchanged. I suspect that in the fullness of time, Ken will have something to say about that, but maybe not right now. Okay. So the next slide, Daniel, I thought long and hard about using the animated slide, and decided that for this particular presentation, it made more sense to use the static slides. The animated slides are great, but we want to get across the notion that we have multiple different domains, that we're trying to address the person-centric problems associated with an individual, a family. I like the version of this slide that shows community in the list as well. But that it's multiple different domains that need to be involved in solving the problems for this family. That involves multiple different organizations and agencies with multiple different individuals that all need to get access to the 360 view of information for that particular individual family, household, community, in order to make good decisions on their behalf. And here's where we get to the beautiful, if scary, Thompson family. Here's where I start. I need to do an introduction of the Thompson family's problem, but then I need to get focused down onto John, because this is going to be John's story during this particular demo. And so we talk about the Unify use cases being homeless SDOH. John is homeless, unfortunately, after the divorce with Sarah. And later on, we're going to have, in December, we'll have a demo where we talk about the single parent SDOH user story for Sarah and her kids. We've got a homeless COVID user story coming up in, I think, January. I've modified this a little bit from some of our previous ones, Daniel, with the addition of Alan to our team, that we need an Inc. substance use report or mandated report in the February timeframe. We need to be able to do a courts service plan in the March timeframe. But we have this marvelous opportunity to get a little deeper into the behavioral health side of trying to treat Jameson in perhaps the April timeframe. And I realize that goes past our current roadmap for these, but I rather expect that we're going to be working on this through 2021 on various and sundry aspects to the problem. So I don't feel too bad about adding another month to our list, to our roadmap. Is that okay by you, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for prognosticating what's going to happen in January, that looks like a good roadmap there.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Does anybody?
Brian,
Go ahead.
I was going to say one thing. We can work through some of the sort of introductions of this, but it might be really worthwhile to actually have Dr. McCoy introduce, Inc. and its role within this as an authentic voice within what is actually trying to be solved. So,
I'd be delighted to have her take over. Let's see. I think have her take over at this point, or
Yeah.
we have her take over here.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. I think that's the beauty of the animation is after you finish the pinwheel, which is a really simple way of describing the nature of the problem, what pulls out of that is the case study. And what I like about that is it shows the connection to the center of that issue. It's the consumer, it's the community. From there, that goes into the POC. So there's a natural flow that is really pretty good. So I'm sure she'd be delighted to do that. But
Okay,
we'll ask her first.
and we can work that out over the course of the next week.
Yep.
For exactly how we do the transition. And I like the animation. I just had a different message to bring. But if we're going to have Dr. McCoy do it, she already has some experience presenting that animation, and I think she'll do great at it.
Yeah.
We do. I took your programs engaged is what I called it.
Yep.
This particular slide, which I'm sure you recognize at this point, the various domains, and duped it to create this list of here are what our use cases are.
Right.
And they happen to cross these domains.
Let me comment one thing that's important, and everybody probably understands this, and we need to integrate this in, is that we need to make sure we're speaking to technical people and enough detailed technical so that, it's kind of like catnip for folks. They want to have the conversation technically, so we need to get to that at some points. But we also need to, we need to also talk with the folks who, as I said before, are tech phobic in a way. And so the role of a use case is so important. That really jumped out at me when people were reacting to the Thompson family out of the NAA. They didn't, I think when we positioned it as you need the use case in order to build technology against, that concept I just think it's missing from a lot of people's minds. And so the role of the story is hugely important because you got to define the data, what you're going to exchange, and then ultimately to Susan's point, what are the data elements? That logical sort of train needs to be spelled out for people who don't think this way or haven't thought this way before. Call me crazy, but I think it's we don't need to underestimate people.
Hey, you're you're preaching to the choir here.
Great.
Because here's where we start getting into a little more of the technical detail, where we start throwing around acronyms like HL7 and FIRE and NEAM and SEDS and the identity resolution and person matching across multiple domains, et cetera.
Right.
And specifically that there are record types. This is the Thompson family general table for what kinds of information do we need to exchange. And then this is all highlighted yellow because I need to change it to be specific to, for this particular user story for John, what information do we need to exchange between an HMIS system and a human services system in order to get John the services he needs to get him off the street.
Cool.
But to Susan's previous comments, this is something we created quite a while ago and I thought you were involved in it, that talked about for the various events within our user story, what information needs to be exchanged, what systems do they get exchanged in between, and what are the standards that have been defined for that, or that need to be defined for that. I think, in fact, this is incorrect. We don't have a SEDS mandated report. We have a SEDS incident report, school systems, and we need to create, or at the time we asserted we needed to create a NEAM mandated report, assuming that human services was going to be a NEAM-centric information domain rather than a FIRE-centric information domain. I think that's a jump ball at the moment. And I say that simply to put a smile on Ken's face. So we get into a little bit of detail here, Daniel, but and we only have a couple of slides left here. I want to reassure folks, but that at some point we do need to do a blueprint presentation where we talk about each of the different working groups and what their recommendations are and what specifications have they created that get down into the real nitty-gritty technical weeds. But I don't think we're there yet. Here's where I get to, play the Susan role and say, wait a minute, because we've had some great conversations within these working groups. We've created some interesting pictures, but we haven't created any specific recommendations in Word documents. We haven't created any specifications that say, here's how we are going to do what we have been talking about doing, which is somewhat frustrating as a product developer, because I don't have a spec that I can hand a developer and say, here, go implement this. So we have to scratch our heads and make it up on the fly. But I am equally, as one of the co-chairs of a couple of the groups, I am equally to blame for the fact that we don't yet have these specifications. So I say to all of us, I think we got to get our acting gear over the course of the next few months and start producing some specifications so that we actually do have that blueprint that Daniel wants us to be able to share with the outside world, rather than just saying, hey, look what we implemented. It's really cool.
Hey, Brian, maybe this has already been done, but is that something that Dr. McCoy might be able to give us some direction on in terms of okay, go to this website to find what a fictional service plan is, or whatever it might be, from a data perspective.
Oh, I already know what the NEAM service plan looks like. It's
Oh, okay.
one of the standard documents you can get if you click through the right pages on the NEAM GitHub, you can get there. It is not easy to find, but I have a copy of it. I think, in fact, we may even have a copy of it in the OCL Dropbox, but
Okay.
I will certainly point you at it. And we also have SEDS, the SEDS specifications, and I'm on so many standards bodies working group lists that I have trouble keeping up with them all, as you know. So I think we know where to find this. The question is, which ones are the most important for us to address first? And right now, I think we're going on gut feel that we need to address the question of person matching. We need to address the problems of privacy and consent. We need to address problems like information exchange security. And then other issues we will address in the fullness of time as we trip across them, trying to do the actual proof of concept demos. So I just want to finish this up because we're near the end. We're going to do the demo at this point. I think we're running out of time. I was going to have Eric and I read through a script that I've been working on, but I think maybe we can do that on our own and reveal it when we do the demo to you all next Wednesday.
Oh, exciting.
Yes, our cliffhanger here. But this is the roadmap of what we're doing, kicking off next Friday with the homeless SDOH demo. And that just involves an HMIS system talking to a human services referral management system. In December, we're going to add in support for a fire server for a hypothetical EHR, providing us with clinical SDOH information rather than HMIS SDOH information. In January, we add additional functionality for, I think that was when I was talking about adding in NEAM on Fire to exchange a service plan with a courts via Fire or maybe via direct. It is unlikely that a court system is going to implement a Fire server in order to receive these kinds of documents, but it's not unreasonable to think that they'd sign up for a direct trust email account to receive these sorts of things via direct. So
one point, just to add, just because of the moment in that, Brian, sorry. Yeah. We're doing these focus groups with Pew Charitable Trust to identify what information technology solutions and innovations from outside the courts can actually help improve the person, the litigant or the customer experience with civil legal court, as well as back office operations. Right. So there's a very strong connectivity point here around the courts, and there's a huge willingness now that it's been never there before, because they've all adopted remote technology to run their cases. And so they're just cracked open. So as we think about what's necessary, it's a different scenario today. We want to get some of those voices into those focus groups so that we get the courts around the table. And we've got the National Center for State Courts involved. We've got Pew obviously involved. We've got the National Council for Family and Juvenile Court Judges, which is the National Family Dependency and Family Court Judge. So there's a lot of large legal court organizations that are now paying attention as well. So there'll be some interest in that. And that's actually part of the New Jersey equation, and the Inc. is to potentially link in the courts in terms of their the kids in custody around especially around substance use disorder and removals from their home. But go ahead.
No, it's quite all right. This is good. The connection with the courts is really important, and we have ways of dealing with it. We can send, for instance, a NEAM XML adjacent document using a FHIR document resource. It doesn't care what's in the document. So we could make use of FHIR as a mechanism for exchanging NEAM information. The only question is whether or not the recipient is likely to have a FHIR server to receive it. And that's where talking about direct trust, the direct mechanism, I hate calling it a protocol, it's just SMTP under the covers, but to have secure email between systems would be yet another mechanism for us to get NEAM documents to a court system in a standards-based fashion rather than the current ad hoc fashion.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, we get into child welfare mandated reports in February. We get into, the full integration of the court service plans, education service plans, care plans, referrals with ELTSS, potentially 360X somewhere in here. Of course, we're talking about a few months down the road, and at least in startup company months, there's a lot of water that goes underneath the bridge between now and March. So I hate to get fixated too tightly on things in the January, February, March timeframe until we see how things play out in the course of November and December and early January.
It may even be more realistic to just put 2021 on those final two ones, because we don't know what's going to happen next week. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID blowing up the country.
Yeah.
We don't know anything. So I would just maybe be a little less specific around that. And also there's a big resource requirement to get these working groups going and moving and shaking and rattling and rolling. So not the least of which, anyway.
Well, this is the penultimate slide, the final slide being, join the community. And I do have a whole bunch of slides in backup here that had originally been proposed as potential slides. I've removed the architecture detail slides. I think this is the wrong audience for those architecture detail slides. But don't worry, we will have a blueprint presentation that comes along at some point. Plus, I know from experience just earlier on today that working through this slide set is going to take us the better part of an hour, possibly a little more, given that we need to be able to do the demo in there as well. The demo should go fairly quick. It's less than 10 minutes long.
We've got an hour and a half, so we should be, things always take longer, but we should plan on at least an hour and 15 minutes. I don't think the upfront, maybe 15 minutes upfront, just to set the context within the NIC and within the NAA and how the pieces fit together in a way that many people may not. It's complicated stuff, so we need to clearly, as best we can, articulate that, and then go into this. Thank you.
We have 3 minutes left. I turn the meeting back over to you, Daniel, and we will do more next Wednesday.
Cool. This is great. I think I'm really happy we've got, a week and a half, so we're not banging on this. This is good. I think there's work, to be slimming it down and honing the message but then it'll be great. If we can get the NAA folks, and if everybody on this call understands that we can begin to sort of translate that and socialize it within the groups we're all working on, and get people excited about it and start to do that crosswalk connection. And think about how the meeting on the 6th will fold into the meeting on the following week on the 13th, which will be informed by all the intersection groups. So there's a lot of sort of stuff percolating here that may be really very helpful. Any other we can stay on for a couple more minutes if people have an interest to have questions or any particular observations. You know, this is new territory. This is all, you know, we're in blue sky territory here. So, you know, it's trepidatious is an interesting way, you know, good word, but what are you?
So I would just like to say to Brian that I think I was missing an action while those detailed charts were being put together. And I know that they would be of interest in the neighborhood group that I'm participating in, because we are concerned about the housing and the food and those components.
Excellent. Well, actually, we need to come up with, we've only done the integrated care for kids example. We still need to do the demo, these tables for the other user stories that we are demonstrating over the course of the next few months. So come on down.
How would you guys, that's great, Susan. That's one, I'm glad you really brought that out. I would ask other people who are on the call who are involved with some of the groups, do you see a way to actually bring this into the conversation? How will it sort of hopefully supercharge your discussions or make them act very real in a way or accessible? But everybody jumps off the call here. Aaron, you can take a pass because you haven't been there yet, but it will be your responsibility to carry that water there with us.
All righty.
Rita or Oliver or Dave or Stephanie, or Matt for that matter. Can you see bringing that into the conversation in some way specifically?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The question is, how do we link this work with the working groups so that it makes sense? They understand the exercise, identifying, understanding the use case in a sufficient detail to understand what it is we want to share, what data we want to share, and why that's important, and to just get narrower and more focused on what are the specific things that are most important to go do. That conversation has to be driven in each of the groups, because otherwise it stays up here in the
Yeah,
area.
I've been thinking a lot about this, Daniel, and I think there are, I guess I have a little bit of one thought and one question. So the thought is that we can think about National Action Agenda from maybe at least 3 or 4 different perspectives of the types of policy recommendations agnostic to the domain of need of service, food, housing, etc. So we can think about it as an interoperability type. What are the laws and regulations associated with interoperability and privacy that could be harmonized or addressed? So that's one type. Another type could be what is something that must be done on a federal level. We're not going to be able to get this done without federal approval. And then another is to think what needs state approval, right? And then the third would be, a final group might be what is something that, these integrated care for kids coalitions would have the ability and resources to do on themselves, right? They don't need any other agency approval, but it's a best practice that would help the family. Does that help?
I think a lot of the insights are hospital based. Like New Jersey, it's Hackensack Meridian is the anchor of it, and I think Lurie Children's in Chicago and Montefiore, New York, and it's actually the state. I don't know if there's a hospital group in Connecticut. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. What I just wrote down was, in terms of designing the meeting on the 13th, maybe we actually do another fishbowl and we actually do a POC tech fishbowl and try to link it together, right? Having some version of this conversation within the context of the larger group through the tech lens we're integrating the work, right? That's what I've been banging my head against the wall for weeks now, is how do we actually effectuate the integration that respects the technical aspects of it and shows the actual practical application, that we can do this, and we're doing it now, right? There's pieces of it that are actually real. We'll be going into places that can do all this stuff. So maybe that idea of that fishbowl, which was so successful in the last meeting, if we can sort of structure that, invite half a dozen folks into that call, that conversation, and spend 45 minutes or whatever, linking together the use case, the data, the codes, all of the the standards, the
Yeah.
agencies, right? That gets people, I think, on our wavelength, so to speak. I don't know, call me crazy, but it's an exciting idea.
So I think one thing that.
Oh,
that-
and sorry. And the other part is, you're absolutely right. Sorry. So Christine can do stuff in New Jersey. She's got the authority with the hospital to do stuff in the council, but she's got to interact with Medicaid and Children's Services. So she needs state involvement. They want to replicate this across the state, but the state needs Ken and CMS and ONC to say, yeah, okay, we'll change that policy, or we'll allow you to blend funding, or whatever it is that percolates up. That's one of the major hurdles. It's confidentiality, it's the standards, and it's blending and braiding funding in some way, and a kind of uniform reporting. We need the feds to be able to do that. The fact that they're there and involved makes it a reality in a way that is, again, unique and different.
So one thing that I hope is one thing that could be useful for the National Action Agenda is to have someone who falls in the type of human service provider that a hospital would be collaborating with, and is able to provide a perspective that is not the hospital's perspective, but is able to talk about some of the barriers that they face that the hospital staff may just not even have any insight into.
Totally.
And I guess having been participated in the National Action Agenda committees and seeing how the conversations unfold, there's one level in which I think there'll be a clear time, which is people kind of naming programs that they know could help this family, right? And that the tools that the demonstration projects is going to show how we can streamline the process of eligibility and applying for programs. So that's a clear connection. I think with the guidance for these conversations that might be helpful is there, are you trying to kind of narrow the types of policy recommendations that they want to make, right? So for example, a universal basic income is out of the scope because it's politically unfeasible, right? And it's not the type of recommendation that we're looking for, right? So I think saying, okay, this is the out of bounds, right? These are the out of bounds policy recommendations. We're trying to focus the conversation on ABC, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm going to say one more thing, and then anybody can drop off if you want, but this feels like there's some energy around this conversation that should persist for a little bit, because it's actually the perfect conversation to be having right now. I'm going to sleep a lot better tonight, I'll tell you that. So two things. One is we have to go from the case management solution that Christine and the other Insights have, and Fairfax have, and Pima have, and everybody has. They actually got to connect the stuff. Right, Alan, you need to have the data in order to coordinate services for people who are in your office or across the computer. So you need that, and to take some of the friction out is important. What's the challenge here is we need to operate at that level, but then we also have to say, yeah, let's do that. That's the broken family. That's the Thompsons at tilt. How do we not do that? What a way of actually getting them the services or the programs or the interventions or the violence prevention, whatever it is, a little farther upstream, So to generalize from the specific case of the Thompsons to those policy things that are actually getting in the way. And those are the things I rattle off are things I think everybody universally agrees with, along with universal basic income, maybe, but they're very pragmatic things, that have been talked about for years, decades, So, but the point is, what are the 3 things we're going to do? And this is the hardest part of what we're trying to say is, the National Academy of Sciences did an amazing report last year that 250 subject matter experts, they've got 5 areas and 50 recommendations under each area. Where do you start? What do you do? Right. And one of those things is to bring back, to leverage A87 and to bring back, standard and condition 7 to require interoperability under Affordable Care Act. You bet. Let's do it. But the thing is, we need to identify 3 things we're going to do starting in 21. What are the 3 things that we could actually do? If we can do that and have that discipline, we might actually be able to do one of them. And how exciting would that freaking be to be able to say, you know what, we blended streams here. We got those NOFOs to say, you know what, you can build technology and put all the money in a pot together, figure out what's the best thing to do. That would be a home run in my mind. So narrow, yes, but strategically narrow, strategically opportunistic to actually tilt I go back to it. We're talking about a $5 or $6 trillion system. You put in healthcare and human services and disability and workmen, that's half of the GDP. If we can tilt that a little bit, man, that's exciting. That's exciting work.
Well, I think the key from a proof of concept is to, take capability that exists, that's available, and, connect that stuff together versus thinking about every state and their own individual care management, case management, referral process, whatever, such that, you have some control and some limited, way of what the proof of concept is going to actually prove, right? And to show that, exchanging information from one thing to another, whatever that may be, or whatever they may be, it is the way of the future. And so, states need to think about that when they're looking to revamp systems. Let's take DC, for example, late, either early 2020 or late 2019, they put out an RFP for a case management system, right? So what do you think they're going to get? It's probably not going to be something that's going to be interoperable out of the box and so on and so forth. So really, are they going to push the boulder any further, up the hill than it currently sits, right? Which is at level land. So, you got these things going on with no sort of notion of any of this stuff that we've been talking about for this past hour and a half or more, as inputs into their thought process and their RFP and so on and so forth. They're just going to build a case management system that, deals with nothing other than case management data, right? So, those are the missed opportunities, right? When you look at it, from a 50 plus state perspective, right? And everybody cutting RFPs to do this or do that or do the other thing. And really,
I think this is great, and Daniel, I really agree with trying to identify an actually operational deliverable, right, for 2021. I was just kind of thinking, Ken, that, well, maybe this group should think about offering sort of strategic knowledge services to people writing RFPs, just to help, you know what I mean? Because that just, and there are so many, and we saw one last year, it got put out and then pulled back because they didn't get a good response. And then again, which is to kind of just connect between school system and justice system, public safety and justice. So I actually think I recommend, I really would love if the group all decided to let's do something to show interoperability between healthcare and justice, public safety and justice. And of course, and you know, my additional area of some knowledge is in behavioral health, and you know, all this stuff with police going out to respond to a domestic violence call and end up shooting people or getting shot.
Yes.
So I would love to do that. I think with what you know, Matt's company, my company, other resources, we can absolutely deliver something that'll work as long as we decide what it is.
Well, I think that the opportunities are significant in terms of everybody I've talked to for years, and we've brought thousands of people together. You know, they want a reference architect. You know, Rick Friedman was all right. You know, he was like, let's give them the map. let's do it, right? And that's where NISIA came to play. And that's, could we actually then pay for it with adopting a NISIA architecture, updated, fireized NISIA, that Medicaid could go pay for the damn thing every day.
That is actually on my roadmap.
Great.
You know, is to take NISIA into fire work groups and create a case management capability, if you will, based on that architecture in a fire format. So
got one semantic comment for those of us who were born in the 50s. When you say the word tilt, you know, I'm thinking pinball.
Right.
And do you know Susan Fox? Did you guys intersect?
No, I have not met you before, Susan.
Susan, you should just give a little background, because this is right in her proverbial wheelhouse, if you don't mind, Madame.
Well, I spent all my career days working in the Medicaid domain, focusing on what you just mentioned about developing RFPs to obtain better systems. And toward the end of that period of my life, I was the lead on the MITA, if any of you remember the Medicaid Information Technology Architecture, which was supposed to be one of the solutions to the problem of all of the silos. And when the conditions and standards followed and said one of the conditions to obtaining a new system had to be that it be interoperable, that it be able to plug and play, and the problems that followed seemed to be associated with really the government not being able to take a firm stand and say, we've got it in writing, why don't you do it? And I think there was a lack of funding. There was a lack of trying to take at least one state system and make it become the system that everyone else would have to use, or at least, if not all the inner workings of the system, at least the ways in which these systems receive their data and send data back out. If the data standards, and we were totally hooked into HL7 for this, but again, the funding did not follow the vision. And so that's why I mentioned earlier something about my tombstone. I wanted to say she tried to get MITA to be a reality.
Indeed.
And we had it in the middle of the development of MITA. We spent 2 years working with SAMHSA to bring in the behavioral health standards for the case management and the assessment and treatment plan, et cetera.
Yep, with
That
Richard
was a
Dorsey.
very healthy collaboration.
Yep.
It's very interesting. Thank you for that. And yeah, a lot of history that we don't want to repeat. I think we want to learn from it and make this successful.
Well, the one thing with government funding is that, you know, one day it's there and the next day it's not. So, and the winds of change happen every 4 or so years, because one administration's priorities are not the next administration's priorities, and so on and so forth. So,
Right.
that's just the foibles of the government in and of itself. The thing with the government is to try to get as much done with the money that you have, such that you can show progress on how it's helping whatever agency is funding it. So those are the key things. Now with MITA, MITA had a big price tag associated with it. And so MMIS systems were like the black hole, right, for money and cash and so on. So it was really tough to get CMS, for example, to say, okay, here's $1 billion, go out and do something, without that $1 billion going down a black hole and having not much to show for example. So those are the kinds of issues that you deal with from government funding perspective. So at any rate, I got to go. This has been great conversation, and I'll talk to you all next week.
I can.
Bye again.
Again, Daniel, just a
I
quick
have to
question.
go also. So thanks again so much, Daniel and Brian, for bringing me into this. I'm really excited about working with all of you guys. So.
Alan, before you jump off, I just want to point you to Adam. If you're able to join one of the work groups, I think it would be worth a conversation on the healthcare group. I think there's some need for your perspective on that. And Adam is the liaison on that. So
I just sent him a LinkedIn invitation, which he just accepted. So we'll work together. Thank you, Adam.
Great. Welcome.
Thanks.
Daniel, I hate to, if I'm sounding like a broken record, I just wanted clarity on a question about the National Action Agenda. So there might be one, like, let's say top recommendation to help this family. Let's just say it's universal pre-K, right? Like that,
yeah.
But that's not the type of recommendation you're looking for. You're looking for something that's going to improve interoperability for like integrated care for kids starting in 2021, like that it can be implemented immediately. It doesn't require lots of legislative or bureaucratic approval.
Right. Some might require some legislative action,
might.
but
Okay.
that's not what we're hoping for. There's some stuff that's a lower down, not even lower down. I'm not even sure how you'd characterize it, but just adoption of fire for human services, or the things I mentioned, and I'm sure a lot of other things are doable if you've got the forces lined up to say, sure, the statute doesn't prohibit that. Makes sense. You can use the money. Let's do a waiver. Let's go put this stuff together. It's already been funded by CMMI. I don't know, but yeah, we're not talking about sort of redistribution of wealth. We're not talking about universal basic income.
Right.
In fact, the link I put in here into the chat here is the principles. Is that the principles?
Yeah.
Of the yeah. So this is an interesting document. This is the 2-year distillation of 8,000 people interviewed, mostly people with lived experience from all across the country. That's the foundation for foresight. You'd agree with most of the things there, but none of it's actionable. So we're in the conversation around how do we take that and make it actionable. And the good news, which everybody needs to know about, is there's 17 foundations that are looking for where they're going to collaborate on putting their funding to go fund stuff to go do. And so that's why I was on 3 hours today as well, because I've been invited, and NA and Nick and we've been invited into that conversation. They recognize the importance of it and the reality of being able to connect data and technology. So it's another stream of work that's going on. I'll also mention one other thing that's useful is HIMSS. I also sit on the HIMSS SDOH group, and they're going through a series of definitions, which I'll share with you, to define what are the criteria to evaluate new programs or applications for SDOH. And there's some common definitions that's being worked on by the pretty erudite group. We can just adopt those criteria and apply it to the action recommendations that come out of the NAA. So we can borrow stuff from different places and show them that we're actually reusing it. They're paying for it, it's reusable, and theoretically there's some new revenue that comes down that helps us support all of those work teams that Brian has so eloquently listed as needing muscle to make it happen and to write stuff down.
So there could be essentially a regulatory changes required for these recommendations. Like there could be something that requires some kind of change made on within a state or federal government agency.
Yeah, even in the way they write their annual, what are they, they're not the NOFOs. What are the annual program plans that they put out for funding?
Or
State plans.
No, after the new budget, I know ACF sends out 1 million sort of funding, funding opportunities. Notice of funding, right? Well, I guess
Oh, okay.
it is a NOFO. And in there, they all designate how they can use the money. When we worked there in 2012, we almost got them to say you could blend funding between different NOFOs for technology related things. Because that, Susan, that was right at the same time of standard and condition 7. So we were saying, you guys had done all that initial MITA work. We said, let's take that standard condition 7. They were ACF, interoperability was happening. Let's build that out. That's where NISIA came from.
Right,
let's find opportunities to actually connect the silos, at least from the ACF side, with A87 waiver funding. We need to bring back A87. We need A88 is one regulatory thing that could happen, right? That would allow programs not to have to cost allocate, which screws them up every time because they get whacked and Medicaid gets off cheap. All right.
Susan, this is Dave. One quick question for you. When you look back into the MITA days, now there was the ARB and the IARB and the TARB and so forth, trying to specifically talk about interoperability. And in my opinion, CMS really never got behind, here's what we mean by interoperability, which caused modularity to have a problem. If there was no definition of how Part A talks to Part B, then it's really difficult to get modularity to happen. Do you agree that interoperability was a problem with the implementation of MITA, at least version 3 of MITA?
Yes.
So I think it's important for us to keep our eye on that ball of, are we really focusing on interoperability? Because without that, nothing else works very well, in my opinion.
Yep.
All righty then, Susan, if you guys need, anybody else who needs those materials or parts of the PowerPoint, Amanda, we should make sure people have access to this one, even if it's in draft form or whatever slides. So just reach out to Amanda and we'll get you. However we can build this into the conversations that are coming up will be hugely relevant. And I'm going to approach Ken to participate in either the next meeting or the other meeting. I think it would be really powerful to have a federal voice in that fishbowl or as a representative of interoperability, and whether or not he seems to be pretty out there. So, and especially after next Tuesday, who knows, if the administration changes, then I'm sure he'll be willing and interested to participate at least, which I think would be really amazingly exciting for people who understand the possibility of what that would mean. So. Okay. So, Brian and Adam, can we catch up for a minute afterwards? And then we can start drinking after that?
Hey, I'm not invited to the happy hour.
Daniel, I think that Amanda also, I don't know if she's still here or whether she can stay, but she also had a couple of things to touch on.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Cool. BYOB next time.
It's right here, Daniel. You just can't see it.
I know. Get your picture on all the time here. So what's tomorrow? Thursday. I think everybody actually on this call could have, should have had the invite to, Amanda, was it to the, I can't remember if it's to the leader meeting. I think it was to tomorrow's leader meeting. You should have a meeting notification, because what we want to do is we're going to take everybody through the directions. So we've written out sort of the directions, which we can actually share them today, for how the session is going to run, the intersession is going to run. Work with the leads to understand that. So each of the leads and the liaisons, and now hopefully some of us, will really begin to infuse that across the groups, so that the exercise is not just a hypothetical, let's think about this hypothetical thing, but it really gets grounded in the work the direction we're trying to head, which should be pretty cool, I think. All right, I think I can actually stop the recording now. Let me turn that on. Stop that. Pause recording.
So